On Tech News Today, Snowden says the NSA is setting fire to the internet, Gox gets doxxed, and Niel Young to launch a music player, maybe tonight's the night. All that and more coming up next.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
It's Monday, March 10th, 2014, and this is Tech News Today. This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Gazelle, the fast and simple way to sell your used gadgets. Find out what your used iPhone, iPad, and other Apple products are worth at Gazelle.com. And by ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter makes hiring faster, easier, and cheaper. Post your job to 50-plus job boards with one click. Try ZipRecruiter for a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. And welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Mike Elgin.
And I'm Jason Howell.
On Tech News Today, we explore the most important stories of the day in conversation with the world's leading journalists. Our guest co-anchor today is Joe Panettiere. Joe is editorial director for The VAR Guy, MSP Mentor, and Talking Cloud. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me again, Mike.
The reason we have you on today is the International Day of Awesomeness. And you, Joe, are awesome. And that's why you're on the show today.
I heard the rumor, and I'm glad you confirmed it. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Now, this is a somewhat tongue-in-cheek day that's actually a real thing that somebody's trying to get off the ground, and it's essentially to stop and to think about all the awesome people in the world who do awesome things, like jump off of airplanes and throw basketballs like 2 miles. You've seen the videos on YouTube. So it's for those people, the awesome people, and in fact for all of you who are awesome for watching Tech News Today. Well, let's get into the news. NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden began speaking to a crowd at South by Southwest this morning at 9 a.m. Pacific by way of Google Hangouts. With the U.S. Constitution green screened onto his background, Snowden said that the NSA is, quote, setting fire to the future of the internet. And the folks at South by Southwest are the firefighters, he said. The theme of his comments was that technologists, more than lawyers or regular citizens, and certainly more than politicians, need to protect the public from government mass surveillance with encryption and other technological means. The conversation was facilitated by the American Civil Liberties Union. Joe, now it was kind of interesting. He said that the U.S. officials have been unable to track him down because, quote, encryption works. And essentially that was what he was talking about the entire time, which is that we really need to lock down the internet so that just trusting the government to not do mass surveillance of the kind that he uncovered essentially in his whistleblowing activities and all the documents that he's uncovered. We can't ever trust them because we can't ever know, and so therefore we need to make it physically impossible for the public to be surveilled. What do you think about that? Is that does that sound like something that is even feasible? Is the industry going to jump on this and make the internet NSA proof?
This report today screams irony once again. In recent days, as I've been speaking with you on Tech News Today, we talk about the irony of what's going on the web, and here's another one. I think the key takeaway here is he's screaming about encryption, data protection, proper safeguards, and if ironically, those safeguards were in place, maybe all the leaks he was involved in would have never happened. So that's point one. Point two, I cover mostly the business of IT and certainly encryption use, deployment. The numbers all show it's going up dramatically. So yes, I think the adoption rates will continue to skyrocket there. But I'm much more interested in whether any of those safeguards actually could have stopped him from doing what he's been up to. Whether you agree with him or disagree, could these safeguards have put a muzzle on him, sort of speak?
And of course, he's a controversial figure. In some circles, he's considered a traitor. In others, such as South by Southwest, something of a rock star. When he finished his comments a few minutes ago, there was huge applause, and he's very, very popular among most of the technologists, at least that I'm aware of. He had some interesting quotes during his talk. One of them is that Facebook and Google can collect data in a responsible way, by which he meant that they need to not hold on to it for longer than they really need. I really don't see that happening. They make their money by hanging on to data for a long time so that they can track somebody over time and therefore be able to serve them with contextual advertising. Contextual advertising being much more valuable than regular advertising where they don't know what you want, they don't know where you are, and so on. So I don't really see that part of it happening. He said that he asked a question rhetorically: how do we restructure our oversight model, accountability? He said, and we can't have people like Clapper line Congress, and he was referring to the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. And he said that also that we have a model that can work, but our overseers don't want to improve the system, and that's an incredibly dangerous thing. So, there's not a lot of surprises. We know what his position is on the NSA and on surveillance and so on, but it was interesting to hear him speak in an interview format at an event like that, and it's going to be a very newsworthy event. We're going to see lots and lots of stories coming out today about his comments, and I'll look forward to seeing that. Well, in a second, we're going to talk about new Bitcoin news. This is really interesting, but first I want to tell you about Gazelle. Gazelle is a site and a service that will buy your used gadgets. If you're thinking about getting a new gadget, and you really should get the latest and greatest, whether you want a new iPad, new iPhone, new Android phone, whatever it is that you want to get, you can fund part of that purchase with your existing or your old phones. Like most of us have, something like half of people who have owned smartphones in the past still have them lying around in a box or in a drawer or in the garage or something like that. And those phones can still be used, even if they're broken. Gazelle will even buy, in many cases, broken iPhones and iPads. They'll repair them and get them back into use, and that's great for the environment, and it's certainly great for you, because the sooner you can get your device to Gazelle, the sooner you can get paid for it, and the more you'll get paid, because devices, of course, lose value over time. Simply go to Gazelle.com. That's Gazelle.com. Find your item on the site, enter in the condition of that item, and they'll tell you how much they'll pay, and they'll honor that for 30 days. So even if the actual value of your device goes down over the next 30 days, they'll still pay you what they said they'd pay you once you've locked in that price. They'll pay you by check, PayPal, or if you use the Amazon gift card option, they'll give you 5% more. So this is really quite a service. I've used it myself, and I've used it to fund and, frankly, justify new purchases of awesome new technology, and I really like their service, and it's very convenient to use. So what's your phone worth? Take a minute and go to Gazelle.com to find out. Do it now, because your iPhone may lose value the longer you wait. Well, unidentified hackers claim they broke into servers owned by the now-defunct Mt. Gox Bitcoin exchange and found evidence that the site's owners kept Bitcoins they reported as stolen. John Biggs is East Coast editor for TechCrunch, and he joins us today. Welcome, John.
Howdy, howdy.
So what exactly did the hackers say that they found?
Well, what it looks like, and they really didn't describe their modus operandi. They didn't describe what they pulled out. But when I pulled down the file that they had, it had some screenshots from their sort of internal Bitcoin transaction manager, which Mt. Gox was using, as well as a full list of, so I guess, anonymized user accounts. So if you went through this list of anonymized user accounts and you knew how much you had in Mt. Gox in the first place, you could find yourself. And they had that information right there. The download also included home addresses for some of the guys, the CEO. I believe there's also sort of a mailing address in there. It's just sort of the stuff that you would find if someone was digging into your PC and trying to find all the weird stuff that they wanted to use to I guess mess you up. And the other thing they did is literally hack Mark Capella's WordPress page, and his WordPress site is down now, and it was hacked for a good few hours on Sunday night. I was able to go through a few times and grab the data again and again. So clearly nobody was paying attention to that either.
I believe that they also hacked Karpelis's Reddit account and his personal blog.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some Redditors looked at found their own information. Some Redditors who also used Mt. Gox and said, "Yep, that's correct." Is that right? They essentially verified it.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, that's really interesting. And
one of the Redditors. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. One of the Redditors did.
Well, one of the Redditors actually created a Excel file where they were able to you just type in your amount and it'll search it for you. So it's sort of a little database of users.
Now, just because some Redditors said, yes, my data is correct, does that make the accusation credible that they've in fact lied? I mean, essentially what they've said is that all the Bitcoins are gone, we don't have any left, and in fact, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoins are still in their hands, according to this accusation. Now, are these documents a smoking gun that in fact they lied in exactly that way?
No, not at all. A lot of these documents look like they've been slightly altered. The text files that are in there look like just something sort of like ASCII art that somebody would create, and they put some of the numbers in there. Is this a smoking gun? Absolutely not. This is basically something that these hackers found on, I guess, Mark Karpellis' computer or his server elsewhere. The only thing that we have confirmation of is that this transaction list is true, which gives credence to some of the other information on there. But it's going to be really, really hard to tell when this snapshot was taken, if all this stuff is accurate. It would be equivalent of going onto my computer right now and finding an old bank balance and saying, "Oh, this is how much money he has right now." There's really no proof of anything at this point until Mt. Gox actually makes comments on this hack.
Well, we can assume that the investigations currently going on in Japan and also in the United States into the practices of Mt. Gox will uncover this one way or the other, and that's pretty much the only way to confirm it. I don't think there's any ready way for journalists to confirm or invalidate this information. So we'll be looking at that very carefully. So I want to thank you very much for coming on.
All right, thanks a lot for having me.
All right, you can find John Biggs at TechCrunch.com and also on Twitter at John Biggs. That's with 2 G's. Well, Google is launching a software developer kit for Android-based wearable devices. Google's Android, Chrome, and Google Apps chief Sundar Pichai made the announcement at South by Southwest. He didn't say whether the SDK would favor the time and cards-based user interface Google developed for Glass, nor did he mention anything about the smartwatch Google is reportedly working on with LG. But he did say the kit would help with arbitrary wearable applications like smart jackets. I want one of those. The SDK is expected to be available to developers in about 2 weeks. Jay Yarrow is a writer for Business Insider, and he joins us to talk about this story. Welcome, Jay.
Hey, how's it going?
So is this SDK for Android, or is it for some future version of Android designed specifically for wearables?
It didn't sound like it was that clear, but I mean, it sounds like it's an Android designed for wearables. I mean, Android's such a weird thing at this point. It's so all over the place, but I think it's for wearables for Android.
And to what extent do you think the Google Glass UI will be favored in this SDK? Because I'm a Google Glass user, Jason is too, and the user interface is very kind of, it's not especially Google Glass specific. It's just a very sensible cards-based design with, you know, it's time-based. So if you go in one direction, you go into the future. If you go in the other direction, you go into the past. That's that makes a lot of sense for, say, a smartwatch. Do you have any information, or do you have any beliefs that Google will, in fact, favor that Google Glass UI?
I think it's going to be difficult because it's such a broad idea that they're doing. Like you said, it's a jacket, and it could be like glasses, obviously a wearable, or it's a watch. So there's a lot of, it's just a very broad category that they're attacking. And I think that they have to do this way because you saw Samsung came out with the Gear, and it was, it had a lot of problems. It didn't work very well, and that's partially because they're using Android. And they came out with a new version. They went with their own homegrown thing, Tizen. And the reason they told us that they did that is because they said Android just wasn't designed for this kind of product. And I was at Mobile World Congress, I guess it's 2 weeks ago now, and I saw some Chinese company that did a smartwatch. That's basically a mobile phone on a watch, and they were using Android. But it was hilarious because it was a watch face, but it had a normal keyboard. So to try and type in that little thing didn't work. So I think they have to try and figure out how to do a broad-based thing. But, what you're talking about, the Google Now interface, could make sense with the cards and all that. But I think they'd probably want something a little more robust for a watch because it is, you can probably get a little bit more onto that screen than you can with just the touch on the side.
Now, Joe, you have been looking into Google's developer programs for cloud-based development, and we were talking before the show. You were telling me that there seems to be a lot of similarity, or probably is going to be some crossover here.
Yeah, I think you're going to see Google begin to connect the dots. Last week, Google very quietly welcomed 700 channel partners up in San Francisco for a Google Apps conference. So these are more business side partners rather than mobile, wearable, consumer side partners. And during this gathering, Google also spoke quite a bit about ISV relationships, independent software vendors beginning to write applications that are going to run on the Google Cloud platform. So if you look at between the Google Wearable, the Google Android, the Glass initiatives, and now you begin to piece together platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, you begin to see that Google is trying to connect the dots and basically surround and conquer every other initiative out there, whether it's Amazon Web Services or Microsoft, both on the Azure side and mobile side, et cetera. Very interesting times in terms of how Google's trying to piece it all together.
Now, Joe, I keep harping back to the Google Glass interface because this is the wearable device that we know best coming from Google. It reveals their thinking, and of course, it reveals their thinking about smart glasses, not so much smart watches or smart jackets or other wearable devices. But still, it's a wearable device, and we know a lot about it. And what was interesting about that from a cloud perspective is that initially, all the apps were cloud-based. You'd install the app essentially through a web browser. You'd see the app and control it. All the settings were on a web browser. And then later on, they came along and said, well, we also are now introducing a new way for developers to create apps that will actually run on the device itself. But there's still this huge cloud component, and it's not clear at this point whether Google Glass apps, or certainly not clear whether Google Watch apps or this wearable SDK built apps will be a combination of installed, cloud only. You'll be able to take your pick. It's still not really clear, but it seems to me, and I think you would agree with this, Joe, is that being very, very cloud-centric for mobile devices in general is a great idea.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think what we're seeing right now is, on the one hand, Google wants to be that cloud leader. On the other hand, I think they realize it is a hybrid cloud world for the next few years. So the other thing to consider, ironically enough, is you flash back to Moore's Law, right? And sort of the processing power doubling every 18 months or sooner. And if you do that math on Google Glass, well, how much could be running more and more locally thanks to that? On the one hand, you could really up the processing power on Google Glass over the next 36 months, give or take. On the other hand, cloud connections, broadband, everything's getting faster and faster, more reliable. And from what we're tracking with our readership, everything is going cloud, but it's going to be a gradual transition there.
And it's really interesting. I've been playing with a Google Glass app over the weekend called Moment Camera, and it does some interesting things to deal with the lack of Moore's Law with Google Glass now. It's a very low-power device with low battery, and they do things like they take video without showing it to you, which is different from the generic behavior of Google Glass when it's doing video. Now, Jay, he also talked about, of course, a mesh layer. So somebody asked Sundar Pichai about the Nest acquisition. Google recently bought Nest, which makes a smart thermostat, of course, and smart smoke detectors. And he talked about this mesh layer of software, and I sort of interpreted that to mean that Google is thinking about having a mesh network of in-home devices where one device would pick up the Wi-Fi connection or be directly connected, and then the network connection would go from one device to the next, to the next, to the next, essentially mesh networking. Was that your interpretation as well?
I mean, that's one interpretation. I maybe misread it. It's entirely possible. It was a really short excerpt. I wasn't there, unfortunately, but I kind of, when I heard it and was thinking about it, it was sort of, you have all these pieces now for Google. Are they going to be able to play nicely together? Because certainly Nest didn't come from Google, and I don't, I forget what it's based on. It's not Android, but there's some similarities there. But can you get everything to play well together? Can you have Nest, which was sort of in its own design language, its own style, going a certain direction? Can you have that connect with Google Glass, which is completely different? And Google Glass, like you're saying, looks completely different than an Android phone. And if you have these new smart, these wearable devices that have their own UI, is it going to go spiraling in a bunch of different directions, or can you make it all work together nicely? And how does that kind of work together? And that's how I heard it, but you might be right on the more technical level.
Yeah, one of the reasons I am inclined in that direction is that 2 years ago at Google I/O, Google rolled out, made a big push for its Android at Home initiative, and this was essentially a smart home program using Android and so on. They backed off on it last year, and I have the feeling they're going to go strong on it this year. But more recently, some sharp-eyed developers have been looking into Android, looking into Google Now of all things, and seeing references to not only Android at Home, but also this idea of mesh network, and they're using the word mesh. And so it's really unclear, but it does make sense to me to a certain extent to use mesh networking in a home automation scenario, simply because devices are spread out all over the place. If you think about, you want solar-powered lights in the backyard that are connected to the network. How do you get the Wi-Fi out there in a reliable way? Well, one way is to connect them to the security camera, and connect the security camera to the smoke detector, and connect that to the TV, and from there to the internet or the Wi-Fi connection. That's a mesh network.
Yeah, Mike, this is Joe. I think one of the things this echoes is years ago Microsoft at Home, more recently Cisco at Home. Everyone's been trying to come out with, whether you call it mesh or grid computing or peer-to-peer, exactly what you're saying is every device has just enough intelligence to be the transmission line to the next device, so to speak. And not only that, in theory, in the mesh network approach, if one of the devices goes dark or goes bad, now you can just reroute to another device in the grid, and the overall network health is still quite strong, except for the one that goes dead. The thing I'd caution people on here is, I know you've been a Google Glass user. I've been using Google Glass for maybe a month or two now. The thing I come back to is Google tries to do all these different things right now, whether it's wearable or mesh or so on. Google at Home is, when we opened our iPhones for the first time, or when we opened our Android device for the first time, it was seamless. You turned it on, it just worked, you got it. A basic consumer can understand how those things work. The first time I powered up Google Glass, that I used it, that my sons used it, it's a little confusing. It's different. And I wonder how soon these software developers and these SDKs can make things so intuitive as the first time you open up your iPhone or your Google Android device, et cetera, and make it idiot-proof, for lack of a better term. I don't know how close we are to that. I'm thinking we're still 5 years off at best.
That could be, and it's certainly going to be, and I completely agree with you, that it's going to be the apps that save devices like Google Glass and probably the watch. Right now, there are dozens of thousands of Google Glass users, and probably 98% of them use it for nothing more than taking pictures and possibly getting notifications. That's the most rudimentary, and essentially that particular functionality is not worth $1,500. I can assure you. And so
my wife would assure you too. Yeah.
She's, I bet. And
she's saying, what was this $1,500 bill we got? Yeah. Well, so far so good, but we'll see.
Yeah. So you can take pictures that are inferior to the iPhone. I get it. Okay, that's worth $1,500. Great. Excellent. Don't expect anything for Father's Day or Christmas.
I'm long and loudly bearish on Google Glass, so I'm glad you guys are positive on it.
Yeah, I am positive on it too. But again, it's going to be the apps that make it happen. And right now, by the way, and this is something that is underreported, we're kind of going down a Google Glass rat hole here, which is okay because that's really one of the big stories in wearable computing. One of the big things that people don't talk about is that most of the Google Glass apps that exist today are terrible. They don't work at all. And I've installed lots of things, and it's like, okay, nothing happens. Where does it show up? It's really problematic, and a big part of that is because of the SDK side, on Google's side, because they really haven't made it a friendly platform for software developers. And so these SDKs, and again, this SDK, it's really interesting that they're launching it now in March. They've got Google I/O coming up, so I have the feeling that they want to use the users who are downloading the SDK in a couple of weeks when this is expected, and get them sort of bug fixing it and testing it and so on, so that when Google I/O rolls out, they can introduce a better version, essentially, that works better. So hopefully that will happen.
Yeah, that's what Sundar Pichai actually said. He said that we were releasing it early and we want to get some feedback. So, I mean, that's dead on.
Fantastic. So,
Can I just jump in with one more question for Jay? Jay, I'm curious to know, this whole wearable phenomenon, there's a lot of noise right now. I think most of it's vendor noise. Have you seen anything in the market so far that assures you that wearables are the next big thing? Or do you think it is just a hype cycle right now?
It doesn't. You haven't seen anything yet, right? And then unfortunately in the technology industry, not to be that guy, but you just have to be. You want to see what Apple does because it just feels so much like all the other cycles where you had sort of smartphones looked a certain way, iPhone comes out, everything changes. Before the iPad came out, I mean, you had Microsoft on stage with that HP tablet, and that wasn't their first try at a tablet. We had seen tablets attempted. People were on this idea. They thought there was something there, but nobody had quite been able to get it right. And then Apple comes in and says, here's how it's done. And then boom, you're like, yeah, that is how it's done. Well done. And then everyone starts sort of adjusting and scrambling to follow that. And it feels so much like that once again, where instead of, say, Microsoft doing the HP tablet, you have Samsung with its Galaxy Gear that comes out and is a total flop and a dud. And you have sort of Fitbit coming out with these things that are okay, but they're sort of almost like the Kindle e-readers are to the iPad, where they're like, okay, yeah, these are nice. You wear them on your wrist. They help you track all your steps. They're pretty simple. Just like an e-reader for Kindle was like, yeah, this is great. I can read books. It's just nice. I can take it outside. It does this one thing, and it does it really well. And then all of a sudden, the iPad comes out, and you're like, wow, I can read books. I can surf the web. I can do so much more. I just have that feeling of I haven't seen anyone do it. And so you're kind of waiting to see what Apple does. And it's a huge test because, Steve Jobs era, you had faith that, yes, they were going to come out, they were going to define this category, and they're going to show you like, oh, of course, it's so obvious. Yes, that's how it should have been done. So it's, the modern era, we're going to see this is going to be Johnny Ive and Tim Cook's first go at it. And if it's a failure, that's going to be really negative for them and really negative for Apple. But I think that's sort of where I am personally. It's just sort of sitting there waiting and let's see what these guys do, because they've always been the ones who are smart enough to come up with like, yeah, you know what, you're right, this does make sense. And I think even Tim Cook at the D conference last year said, you guys, he said to Walt and Kara, he said, you're wearing watches, but young people don't wear watches. And I don't know if I've seen any companies that can make it cool to wear a watch. And, Walt kidded back like, well, do you know any company that could be? And Tim wouldn't, take the bait. But there is this idea of like, let's see what you can do, because it isn't like the things that we've seen so far. Pebble, it's okay. It's niche. It's sort of interesting, but it doesn't say to you like, yes, I need to spend $200 to $500 to get this thing. And all the reporting suggests Apple is going to go on this very fitness oriented thing, which sounds interesting if you're getting older. Like I just came from a hospital, my dad had cancer, and so I was there and I was thinking like, okay, yeah, I could see fitness kind of thing. But if you're younger, you don't care. You don't go to a doctor. You don't care about any of that. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, because I think for now, it's what you said. There's a lot of buzz and it's a lot of hype, but the reason is the smartphone boom is over. We're in a slow growth phase. Tablets even happened faster. And again, we're not going crazy with growth there. And so people are looking for the next thing and they're just throwing their hands up and saying wearables. It has to be wearables. But we haven't seen one thing to say, yes, this is going to be big and people are going to wear Google Glass and they're going to wear smartwatches. And that's traditionally been Apple's role to say, no, here's why you're wrong and here's why you are going to do this. So we're going to have to wait and see, I think. I mean, it's possible Google comes out with something advanced in June. I'd be kind of shocked. It hasn't really been Google's strong suit in that regard, but maybe they will.
That's a very astute analysis, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Jay, for coming on Tech News Today.
You got it. Thanks.
All right. You can find Jay at businessinsider.com and on Twitter at JYarrow. That's Yarrow with one R. Singer-songwriter Niel Young plans to unveil a portable digital music player this week at South by Southwest. Called the Pono player, the device will be what Young calls, quote, highest resolution digital audio player available, according to leaked details of his announcement. Jason, is that going to go in your pocket? That looks pretty uncomfortable.
It does not look like a very nice, convenient, comfortable pocket device, but all along, this has been a project that Niel Young's been working on for a few years now, and it's had a couple of different names. And all along, I've been kind of intrigued by what he's what he's trying to do here. He's basically saying, you know, convenience has trumped quality as far as MP3 is concerned, and people have just gotten used to the dead, you know, kind of quality of MP3, and that there's a way to make music sound as good as it does straight from the recording desk, you know, where it's completely uncompressed and untainted by, compression, even though it sounds like Pono has to have some sort of compression algorithm happening here, so it must just be really good. But he's really rails against the MP3 quality. I'm intrigued. I'm interested to know, because, you know, from a recording perspective, you know, being a musician, I do understand that there is a difference between what music sounds like at the point of recording and mastering and mixing versus what you end up getting in the MP3 form. I just don't know if people are going to be willing to spend $400 to do that. On top of that, it requires a large library, right? It requires artists to and you know that library to be built, so deals to be made to bring this music in this completely uncompressed, you know, audio file format. I don't know. It has a steep mountain to climb, but I'm curious and intrigued.
Yeah, and they're coming into the market 13 years after Apple did. So just, go in and take on Apple. No big deal.
Yeah.
The $399 price that you referred to is actually the early bird price. So it's likely to get more expensive than that. Just a little more details on this news. It's going to have an online music download store, essentially an iTunes store, called Pono Music. Niel Young himself will be the chairman of the company, and he'll work with the chief executive, John Hamm, presumably John Hamm being the CEO of the company. And he's a music industry veteran. And they're working with hardware maker Air Acoustics to produce the device. It'll have 128 gigabytes of memory, and you can boost that storage with memory cards and so on. This is one of the disturbing things for music lovers, I think, and certainly John. Where's John? Hi, John. John is a music lover. Is the degree to which a lot of people, you had mentioned that Niel Young pointed out that people are choosing convenience over audio quality. People are actually choosing lousy audio quality over superior audio quality when the convenience factor is the same. You look at Beats headphones, and you look at the way that a lot of people trick out their car stereos and so on. It sounds horrible, and horrible sounding music seems to be, there seems to be an ambivalence at best, and almost a hostility to high quality music at worst. People listen to earbuds. Most of the behaviors around music by the masses tends toward super low quality audio, and I think what Niel Young is trying to do here is start a cultural revolution, if you will, to bring back appreciation for super high-quality music in the mass market. I think he's got an uphill battle.
Yeah, and I think the difference there, like hearing you talk about like Beats and, audio in cars, it's a difference between enhanced audio, which, people, I remember back when I was a kid, the stereos in my parents' house always had that loudness button. And even though the loudness button is really only meant to be triggered when the audio is really quiet to kind of give you a little extra boost on the low end, you still punched it on because it made everything loud and boomy when you turned it up. So it's like this difference between enhanced audio versus what Niel Young is talking about, which isn't necessarily better, but it's truer. It's closer to the original. And that might not be enhanced to all get out, but it's what the artist, what the mixer, what because he is an artist, what the musician behind that music intended for in the beginning. And whether that has value beyond just the enthusiasts into the mainstream, I'm not sure. Some people might listen to that and go, wow, this sounds really dead to me. This doesn't sound nearly as good as, when I get in there with my thing and boost everything all up and make it sound better.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, he's got an uphill battle if he's going to be competing with Apple and also trying to get people to do this. And
licensing is going to be a big deal.
That's right. So my recommendation to Niel Young is to use ZipRecruiter, which is one of our sponsors today, to hire people, because if you have the best people in your company, you have the best shot at competing with companies like Apple. You really need to hire the best people if you want to compete in today's marketplace. And the economy is much better than it used to be, so hiring good people is harder than ever. And that's where ZipRecruiter can really help. You can post your job board, if you have a small company or if you're a hiring manager, to 50-plus job boards with a single click. And that's really part of the secret to hiring the best people. You want to go where the candidates are, and they are everywhere. And so with ZipRecruiter, you can also post to social networks like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, because they're also on the social networks. And you can even add your company logo and colors to make your job pages essentially extensions of your business. You can add unlimited users to your account so you can get help with the recruiting process. And you can create an instant job page on your website that includes a company careers page and so on to use a careers link. Now, you can post once and watch the qualified candidates roll in. The problem is when you're going to go that wide with your job search, you're going to get lots and lots of candidates. And that's why it's great that ZipRecruiter will automatically highlight the best candidates for you instead of allowing you to be overwhelmed by both good and not so good candidates. So you screen them, you rate them, and then you hire the right person fast. So try ZipRecruiter and find out why they've been used by over 100,000 businesses. Right now, our listeners can try ZipRecruiter for a free 4-day trial by going to ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. I'm going to give you that one more time. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. And we thank ZipRecruiter for their support of Tech News Today. Well, Friday, we told you about a startup social networking app for drunk people called Liver. Remember that, Joe?
I do.
Quite a startup.
I was a designated driver this weekend. Couldn't find the app for anyone else, but yes, I do recall.
I was the designated drinker this weekend. But anyway, the idea was a breathalyzer attachment to an iPhone plus an app, which were combined as part of a social network that you had to be drunk in order to participate in. Although nearly all the blogs and publications that covered it reported the news as fact, we called it a hoax. And later Friday, the so-called entrepreneurs behind it, turns out they were comedians, admitted that the product was fake and the whole thing was a joke. Well, that's why you should get your news from Tech News Today, I tell you. So anyway, it was a crazy idea. It was a kooky idea. It just wasn't a real idea. Joe, I want to thank you for being on Tech News Today again. You are an awesome guest co-anchor, I tell you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Mike. It's always good to be here.
All right, and where can people find your work?
Absolutely. TheVarGuy.com, where we cover the IT channel, MSPmentor.net, where we cover managed services, and TalkinCloud.com. There's no G in TalkinCloud.com, where we cover the cloud service provider market.
All right, wonderful. Well, thanks again for being on.
Thank you.
All right, well, you can get breaking news every day by following Twit News on Twitter. You can subscribe to Tech News Today at twit.tv/TNT. And please email us at tnt@twit.tv. Leave us voicemail by calling 260-TNT-SHOW. And subscribe to our subreddit at technewstoday.reddit.com and follow our social pages by searching for Tech News Today on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and YouTube. Also, don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight, at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every weeknight. My name is Mike Elgin. Have an awesome day. We'll see you tomorrow.